Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Freestyle Chess Challenge here in February of 2024. Today is February 16th, and today we will crown a champion. Magnus Carlsen is playing Fabiano Caruana. Today is their second classical game. If this game ends in a draw, just like it did yesterday, they will play rapid playoffs. Our third place match is Nodirbek Abdusatoro versus Levon Aronian. Our fifth and sixth place match is Alireza Firouzja versus Gukesh. And our seventh and eighth place match is Vincent Keimer, hometown hero from Germany, versus Ding Liren, the reigning defending champion of the world. Now, before we get into this recap, just a couple of things I'm going to apologize for. Number one, they are doing some sort of cleaning, and there is like nonstop noise behind me. So if at any point you hear something, apologies. Second thing is I actually got food poisoning last night. So I went to this great event here in Charlotte, North Carolina, met a bunch of chess fans, signed a bunch of books, and then I decided to sit down and have some food, and I got food poisoning. So I did not sleep the whole night, basically. Woke up every hour, and I'm just strong enough to actually walk from my bed here. So if this is not the typical Gotham that you are used to, I do apologize, but I'm doing my best. Now, the story of Ding Liren. Yesterday, Ding Liren lost to Vincent Keimer, bringing his record in this event to 3 draws and 9 losses, which is absolutely nuts. Now, if Ding wins this game, he ties Vincent, and then they will play a rapid tiebreak. If he draws or he loses, then he finishes the event in 8th place. And we have, of course, Fischer random, chess 960 starting position. So white has the 2 bishops here, the 2 knights in the corner. Interesting, actually, white can castle on the first move, but Ding plays d4, d5, and as early as the 3rd move, he does in fact commit his king. And it's an interesting decision, of course, because you don't have to. I mean, you can try to play to open up your flank king and queen, rather your rook and queen. It's the food poisoning talking. I don't know chess pieces anymore. That's what the engine always likes to do, but he castles, and then a couple of moves later, Vincent castles as well. So we have the following position from the opening. Now, just keep in mind, Vincent does not have to win. Vincent won yesterday. So it's got to be Ding who takes the fight to Vincent. He plays knight c3, Vincent captures the pawn on e4, and then utilizes this pin right away to put pressure on Ding's knight and queen. Of course, Ding defends, and now we have bishop d5 by Vincent. Bishop d5 is a very interesting move, by the way. I think he kind of wanted to avoid various knight a5 ideas. So if the bishop just develops here, white will play knight a5. He can play c4 in the future, and this bishop will get a little bit stuck. So this way, Vincent is winning the battle for the light squares in the center. Now we have h4, bishop d2, bishop f4. And from the early opening, I mean, visually, white's position looks quite strong. But apparently it's not. And apparently this bishop maneuver costs Ding a full point of evaluation, which is kind of nuts. Like, I don't get why. Apparently he should have put his bishop on e3 because right away there's knight c6. And not only is there knight c6, there's a5. And it is actually surprisingly challenging to meet black's incoming pawn attack on your king. Like, the possibility of a queenside attack is actually very, very brutal. So we have knight c3, take, and he just plays a4. And Ding is completely lost again in about 12 moves. And this, yeah, again, I mean, just absolutely shocking stuff. The queen in the corner, the knight, and the rook all converge on this pawn. So Vincent wins a pawn. And then he trades rooks. Bishop g7, we have take. And a couple of moves later, Ding will in fact win this pawn back on a4. But Vincent plays queen d6, and he's not worse, and queen d2 is a massive threat, which you cannot actually meet. You just have to deal with the ramifications of the position afterward. Knight c3, rook e3, and black is just completely dominant. I mean, his knight is really powerful, the queen and rook are powerful, plays queen here, setting up this move, king a2, rook d2, and just absolutely surgical precision. Rook d2 played, knight d4, and here is on the way, and Ding resigns, and that ends Ding Liren's tournament. Vincent defeats him 2-0 in the 7th place match, gets 7th place. Ding ends the event with 3 draws and 10 defeats, which I'm not really going to talk much more about because I don't have the energy, but that is, yeah, I just really feel for the guy, and I really hope Ding returns to form. That's I've been saying it time and time and again in these recaps, but clearly not his event. And obviously very difficult to play a match when there's nothing really to be gained. Now, Gukesh does have something to gain. The winner of this match for 5th and 6th place gets an invitation to the next edition of this event. Now, granted, this event is invitational, but at least that way you secure it. So even if you didn't make the top 4, I think the rule is that if you make the top 5, you get an invitation to the next edition of the event. Now, yesterday, Gukesh lost. All right? And of course, our next 2 games are 3rd, 4th, and then the championship game. So, Gukesh needs to beat Alireza. These guys play actually a very similar looking setup. In fact, almost identical to this game. Like e4, e6. So, very similar structure. And Gukesh brings out both his knights. Take. And actually, Alireza does the exact same thing that Vincent did. So, it's very interesting that they decide to play in a very similar way. In fact, it's the same position after 8 moves. In fact, it's the same position after 8.5 moves. Because in this game, we had h4 as well. But here, Vincent went g4. Alireza takes on h4 to open up his rook as opposed to keeping it closed. That's very interesting, right? The way, like, obviously there's no openings in chess 960 that we know of yet. But Alireza trades the bishop, brings out his knight. And in the previous game, black went on a big attack here, but that's mostly because white kind of took his bishop off the diagonal. That's not going to happen here. We have bishop e7 and queen f6. But from this position, actually, Gukesh can begin targeting this pawn. I mean, it's a pretty big weakness for Alireza. But he doesn't do it. He doesn't play rook h2. Instead, he plays bishop c3, bishop d2, inviting knight c4, and then bishop c3. God, oh, I don't know if you heard that, but that sounded like pretty epic coming from upstairs. On top of getting food poisoning, I have a pounding headache. I'm in bad shape. I really hope to recover, because I'm here for the Chess Kid National Festival. I can't be out here recovering from food poisoning. Anyway, that's a weakness. That's a potential weakness. And Gukesh is ready to attack it. Alireza, of course, trying to deal with his problems in a tactical way, trying to get rid of these pawns. And he plays f4, and I mean, he's just liquidating. And let's not forget, Gukesh has to win, right? He's got to win. So queen takes h7, he grabs a pawn, Alireza takes, and now this is the extra pawn. It's not really much. There is a tactic here. Rook takes g3, it looks like it works. Rook takes g3, queen f4 check. But after king b1, actually white gets a very powerful attack with knight c5. Various stuff over here. So it looks like you can just win the pawn back right away, but you can't. But it doesn't matter because Alireza just puts these knights like right into Gukesh's face. Knight b5. And yeah, Gukesh, I think knowing he has to play for a win, plays knight b5. But the position is just losing. Queen b6 now, and black is completely winning. Black is going to win material. And again, he doesn't need to win with black, but sometimes in chess when you have to win with a certain color, and you know, you're deliberately taking a bunch of risks, that side will just make the draw. And you know, he completely does not have to do this, but he plays here, trades everything, plays b6, and basically says, Gukesh, you're not going to win this game. And yeah, players agree to a draw. So Alireza Firouzja gets 5th place, Gukesh gets 6th. Alireza secures a invitation for the next edition of this event. Now, it is time for our 3rd place match. Yesterday, these guys played a banger of a game. They played a game where at the very end, Levon, you know, pulled some genius out of his you-know-what, and basically saved an endgame down 3 pawns, which is ridiculous. I'm just taking us back to the opening. Here, Levon plays in English, so he plays like this. c4, knight c3, g3, which is generally the starting position of an English opening, with the bishop coming to g2. It's very fascinating that we have an English. So c4, g3, bishop g2, this is like just a pure English opening, like it would be, you know, in any other situation in chess. We have a trade, and here we're going to have a totally different game. In the previous 2 games, we had massive explosion in the center of the board. Here, we have a totally close position. So Neither guy is like clashing open or doing anything. Instead, white is relying on the queenside pressure with the queen on g2. Now knight c6, and here Levon right away plays b4, and clearly already, as you can see from the evaluation, on move 7 has a very, very powerful initiative. His pawns are moving directly into Nojibek's knights, and Nojibek can't actually capture here because the pawn on b7 will fall, which will symbolize and begin the complete devastation of that position. Nojibek here has to play a really ugly move. It's really not a move you want to play. He spends a lot of time, ultimately decides to play it. And yeah, rook b8 defends that pawn, but now you can't castle that way, which is horrendous. It is really horrendous. And from the opening, obviously in this game, Levon just wins it. I mean, he won this opening hands down with this type of setup. And, you know, apparently Nojibek blundered on the second move, which is kind of insane that that's how chess 960 works. Like, instead of d6, he should have castled. And actually, just in general, in chess 960, the computer really likes opening up the queen and rook before committing anything else. But as you can see here, it's very indecisive. It just told me to play h5, I played it, and now it's starting to reconsider. So even the computer doesn't exactly know. Maybe white just has an inherent advantage. Knight b3, and now Levon just has to develop his pieces, and he just goes for it. He just plays c5. He's attacking Nojibek while Nojibek's king is still stranded in the center of the board. He's going to have a very powerful initiative that he's going to try to open up. It's just a very difficult position. We have pawn takes on c5. We have knight c5. Knight takes b7 is a threat, so black has to move his king. It's as if black just invented a new chess 960 position by moving his rook and moving his king. Now he can't castle at all. Miserable. Levon just backs up. He just backs up because the c-file is going to open with massive, massive attacking possibilities. Take, e6. Now castles. Because again, you can commit your king this way, but you would obviously rather have the rook. So you got to commit your king the other direction. And you don't care about h4. None of this matters to you because there's no attack. Your queen is actually doing a very nice job defending your king. And now rook a1. Rook a1 and the other rook is coming to c1. Which apparently, by the way, according to the engine, wasn't even right. Apparently, he should have played bishop f4, and that's how he should have continued his attack. But he puts both rooks like this, and I don't really know how Nojibek is expected to defend this position, considering he already moved his king. So his king and rook are completely stuck. Pawn takes g3, pawn takes g3. He activates the queen to try to create some problems, but now Levon's a pawn up. Levon is a pawn up with all of the benefits of his position that he had previously. Rook to h8, there's still no threat. White's queen is doing an excellent job protecting the king and attacking from a distance. Every piece Levon has is activated. Knight, rook, other rook, and queen. The queen is defending, protect, attack, and most importantly, eat snack and get food poisoning. e5. Bishop slides back. Black's position completely disintegrating, and even from a distance, mate is covered. Nojibek backs up, and I gotta tell you, from start to finish, this game was all Levon. Look at that. Look at that. Just walking out confidently against all of this. Queen g1, rook h1. Rook takes e4, sacrificing a rook. What an absolutely beautiful move. And the funniest thing is after he sacrifices the rook and attacks the black king, the entire idea of this was to promote a queen. But first go here. That is pretty. That is quite a way to end the game. Your opponent's going to take, and you are going to end 4 pawns up with an absolutely devastating attack. And Levon, the deserved winner. Absolutely beautiful game from start to finish. I mean, he just played a very energetic, like, English-style attack with bishop g2 and b4, and just what a game. What a game from Levon to get 3rd place. And this is vintage Levon. I mean, he's really good at these, like, odd, dynamic, creative positions. And now it is time for the main event. So, again, openings in these games have been confrontational in the center. Levon played in English. Magnus plays g4. So Magnus decides to open up his queen, and if you're ever playing chess 960 on the internet, you will sometimes snipe one of your opponent's pawns like this. Believe it or not, the best move here for black is to castle queenside. There's no other move. If you bring your knight out, you run the risk of running into the same stuff that Nojibek ran into, which is white is actually very powerful on this diagonal. And there's even moves like d4, and you can't take because losing this pawn is devastating. It's really, really bad. So instead of that, actually, black should castle. And probably Fabiano did not want to commit his king so quickly. Right? Like, it's very rare you can, castle on the first move, even in chess 960. But he plays c6. And the craziest thing about the move c6, it was literally given a question mark. Oop, what is happening? There we go. It was literally given a question mark by the game analysis. Can you imagine? You look at your own game analysis and it literally questions your first move. It was given a question mark. But the idea is very straightforward, obviously, right? Like, he just wants to stop queen takes b7. He doesn't want to put his knight out, and he wants to play d5, and he doesn't want to castle that quickly. And then Magnus is like, all right, well, I'm going to castle. You don't want to do it. I'm going to castle. Somebody's got to castle. And I've sort of been telling you throughout this recap already, the computer in chess 960 really likes to open up queen and rook. And there we see it. We see Magnus commit his king and then play g4, h4, which is very interesting. So now he's going to try to expand on that side of the board. It's not a good idea to capture this pawn because white will very quickly take as much space as possible, take and advance. So instead of that, we have h6. Magnus takes some center space. And there's that plan in action by Fabiano. So we have this d5, c6, very strong kind of complex. The dark squares are potentially a little bit weak, and these knights are going to struggle to get out. Like, the knight can't get out here, so it's going to have to get out this way, which means this bishop might struggle a little bit to get out. And Magnus kind of sensing already that his opponent is playing in a very passive way, plays this move e4. Just trying to make Fabiano commit things defensively. We've seen e4 quite a bit, and we've seen everybody who played against the move e4 play e6. Why black is not taking is because your king is still in the center, right? So, like, white can play knight c3 and try to play for d5, which could be very dangerous. And if white gets the queen out, the attack could be potentially very, very potent. So instead of that, we have castles now by Fabiano. So Fabiano, after all of that, finally decides to commit his king. He could have committed it on the second move, but Magnus definitely enjoys a comfortable advantage early. And in this game, we have this. We also had that in the game between Vincent and Ding, but in that game, the knights became a target. Not in this game, because there's no knights out. So a5, a4 isn't a thing. So Magnus has sort of gotten a very, very pleasant edge out of the opening, essentially securing everything that was possible for him to secure. And now Fabiano plays this move e6, and this position is very uncomfortable. He has a lot of pawns on light squares. His light squared bishop is obviously quite cramped. But it's a kind of position where he's like passive and he's solid, and Magnus is going to have to walk him down. He's going to have to take the fight to him. And Magnus says, okay, bishop d2. f4, look at that. Look at that. The fabulous 5 pawns, just all targeting something in the black position. And he's also, as always, gambiting a pawn. Magnus loves giving away pawns in chess 960. This is a free pawn. I think Magnus's idea, if his opponent did this, was to go here and play f5 and just try to team up his pawns together and suffocate the black position. Yeah, for good reason. I mean, this is a very, very tough position now for black. Now, Fabiano plays knight d7. So again, not touching anything and committing nothing yet. And now Magnus makes a decision. What does he do? Which pawn will he push forward? Which pawn will he capture with? Will he capture at all? This is a very sophisticated transformational technique here that Magnus uncorks on Fabiano. First, he takes on d5. Now, both moves have drawbacks. The knight taking has no central pawn presence. So if you take with the knight, white in the future can play like c4. You take with this pawn, you destabilize your king a little bit. But if you take with this pawn, you give white a target on the e-file, which is also terrible. So you got to go like this. And now, very straightforward, you take on g5 like this, and then you push. And the idea is you created an outside pass pawn. So by doing this transformation, you have a protected outside pass pawn. Outside meaning on the edge of the board, only the queen is preventing it. And now that pawn is going to be a major problem for black to deal with in many positions. Not just in the end game, but also in all middle game positions. So Magnus is just sort of slicing and dicing through the black defenses. Black is passive, and he's sort of sitting back and allowing the game to come to him. But because Magnus's advantage is so strong, he's able to kind of transform the position, and now the game takes this type of nature. Bishop d3, developing the bishop. I mean, this move is pretty self-explanatory. Black plays queen h6, safeguarding the pawn, and also maybe preparing to slide the rook out of the way. You definitely did not want to, leave this pawn to potentially make it all the way down. So you block the pawn, rook f1, winning a little bit of file control, rook f8. And now Magnus plays queen g1. What? What is the point of queen g1? I don't know. Maybe he wants to go here? Fabiano here can still consider playing energetically. And maybe the idea was basically to pressure this pawn. Fabiano has to break out at some point. He's got to try to be aggressive at some point. If he just sits back, as you can tell from his bishops and his knights, he's very passive. So, queen g1, bishop c6. Again, maybe f5 would have been the way to go. Very complicated position, however. So Fabi brings his bishops out. And this is a really sophisticated idea from Magnus, who takes a moment here and goes, which of my pieces is the worst? Which is tough to say because they're all honestly doing a pretty good job. And he decides it's the dark squared bishop. And what he wants to do is put it here, where it will have very, very strong pressure on the diagonal, potentially with the queen as well. And to bring the bishop here, he trades this bishop because that bishop is Black's better bishop. So we have take, take. And now Black is left with a light squared bishop and a bunch of pawns on light squares and knights that are scrambling to become relevant. So now Fabiano plays this nice idea, knight c4, just trying to do something. You can take this with white. It does open up the bishop, but it's the move recommended by the engine, and then you can reroute the knight to the center. Magnus plays rook e1 because that rook was not controlling a whole lot. Knight here, and now f5 is played. And Fabiano has the best position that he's had in the entire game. So Fabi's about to begin a comeback. The pawn on e6 is very weak. It's a backwards pawn whose neighbors advance forward, and the square in front of it is completely locked down. And Magnus got to be very careful. Because if he takes, there's moves like g4 check, and all of a sudden that pawn is feeling a little bit loose. So f5. What is Magnus going to do? Well, infiltrates, targeting this pawn. Fabiano plays knight e4. What a move. Secured by both of his pawns. And already here with white, you could go wrong. If you take with a knight, and you allow me to take like this, and now I've got targets, it's a very, very dangerous position to allow me to have. But here Magnus plays his most clutch move of the game, which is a move that doesn't even look like it makes any sense. The entire game has been fought in this rectangle. But when Fabiano plops his knight into the center of the board, Magnus realizes he doesn't actually have a threat. And I can play a4. And the idea of a4 is that in the future, if we trade here, there's knight b5, and then there's also b4 and b5 ideas. So the b5 square, Magnus anticipates for the transformation of the position. a4 is a crazy move to play. Black can play a6 and wait, but then I would take, then I would open up the position, and then I would control a lot of important queenside squares. a4 is a deep move. I mean, it is a high-level move. And Fabiano decides he is going to get rid of one of these knights because they're too annoying, but he takes the wrong one. And as you can tell from the evaluation bar, Fabi decided he was going to be up a pawn, and that would be good enough to secure counterplay with the g-pawn and queen takes h5. But it's not good enough. And now Magnus trades the rooks, sacrifices the queen, forks, picks up the queen back, and when it's all said and done, material is equal, but this pawn is too strong, and the pawn goes. And Magnus can chuck this pawn completely. For a brief moment in time, he's down a pawn in a rook endgame, but he's completely winning because of rook e5. He's actually going to win both of these pawns, play h7, and just go here. And he takes, plays rook g6, trades the bishops, and this is a completely winning rook endgame. because his pawn is too strong. It's going to make it to the h7 square. Black's rook will either have to be very passive or fight from behind, but it doesn't really make a difference. White can play rook g7, h7, and start marching the king. Black's pawns are completely immobile. None of them can move. Black's king is going to get stranded here behind the pawns. Black will have to lose a pawn to activate his king, and it's just not good enough. Rook f1, king d1. Magnus gets the pawn to h7, so now the black rook has to stay exactly where it is. King e1, and this is chucking these pawns because you're just going to walk the king to the g1 square. Fabiano, like I said, sacrificing material to activate his king, but it's just not good enough. Rook c7, everything is held together. The white king is going to walk over here, kick out the rook back, and walk up the board. Black can't do anything. The rook is defending absolutely everything. King e3, king g1, rook h6. Magnus begins the march of the king, and Fabiano Caruana resigns in this position because there is absolutely nothing he can do. He can try to stop the king, but then I will simply play... I mean, I can even play b5, rook c6, but I'll play something like rook here, and, you know, again, I can even walk my king that way. It doesn't even matter. There is nothing to be done. And Magnus Carlsen is the champion of the Freestyle Goat Chess Challenge, the inaugural event, the event that he basically was responsible for organizing and bringing together. And this, I suppose you can call his 18th World Championship title. Technically, this was not the World Championship, but hopefully the next edition has Hikaru, who's the reigning defending World Champion at this format of Fischer Random, and also Wesley So, who's a beast in Fischer Random Chess. But for now, it's Magnus Carlsen, then it's Fabiano Caruana, Levon Aronian, Nodirbek Abdusattorov, Ali Reza Firouzja in 5th, Gukesh in 6th, Vincent Keimer in 7th, and Ding Liren in the 8th place spot. And that's all. Magnus can't stop winning, and it's for good reason. I'm going to go lay in bed because I am not feeling well. I appreciate you all very much for watching the event along with me. Tomorrow we'll get back to regularly scheduled programming. Get out of here.